Welcome back to Merch Disrupted, where we explore the future of the $350 billion branded merchandise industry. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Aaron Yanelli, EVP of Supply Chain Solutions at Kornit, and a print-on-demand veteran from Fast Signs, Woot, and Merch by Amazon. Aaron and I bonded back in 2015 over our love for no-waste, single-piece flow production, and he's been at the forefront of the print-on-demand innovation revolution ever since. In this episode, we'll dive into how supply chain tech like workflow software and AI is revolutionizing print on demand and shaping the next era of branded merch. Welcome, Aaron.
Alex, good to see you again, my friend.
Yeah, likewise. I was just thinking about when I was putting together my notes for this show, when we actually met, and I think it was 10 years ago.
It was.
Does that sound right?
I had been at Woot, a subsidiary of Amazon, for a few months. I had recruited, unbeknownst to me, a common acquaintance,
Yes.
and you stopped into the Dallas area and came to visit our site, and we got into a very animated discussion on the floor there in our facility. And that's how it kicked off.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think one of the reasons that I think we hit it off is one. I don't know if I think I considered myself to be an evangelist for kind of on demand, no waste, single piece flow. Once we did that, I think you even more so than me embody that, and so I definitely have always had a respect for that, and I think also even through your experience at Fast Signs, um, we both found ourselves kind of in this early phase of what we consider make on demand, print on demand. I know you're not a fan of that term. We'll get to that, but that sort of way of doing things, and both struggled with infrastructure and having to kind of build things that didn't exist at a time when that technology was still pretty early. So
Yeah, I think one of the things I've always, I don't know, been challenged by, irritated by, pick whatever adverb fits in there. I think we people get pigeonholed into these concepts, these terms, these ideas. So I actually started, it was not my intention. I started in the print world 33 years ago. That shows how old I am. I had just gotten out of the Marine Corps and I was going to school. I was going to be a high school math teacher was my career plan. I'd started a small business with my pops. Being young, needing money, not needing to sleep, I picked up an extra job working overnights at Kinko's.
mm,
And I fell in love with not the printing per se, but the premise of fulfilling somebody's needs essentially on demand. These weren't terms that were being used. We
right,
were a copy shop. The role of our position was called a copy consultant, and we made copies. There was competition with quick copy and some other ideas, but this is what the idea was. A customer coming in with a need, and we were going to give them a great customer experience, starting with copying or printing whatever they needed very, very quickly, good quality, decent price. What I experienced, sideways conversation here, I ended up staying with that company almost 21 years, right? I did not obviously become a high school math teacher, ended up in print for the next 30 some years, and not intentionally. But what I found was print is just this element of delivering a great customer experience by fulfilling some kind of need that they have, most of which is call it on demand manufacturing, call it on demand fulfillment, call it print. But there's so much that can be done with that. But ironically, this is where I found my professional passion. And I've been really blessed to go through this evolution because when I started, the vast majority of printing was still being done in a true analog fashion. So
right.
whether it was plates, whether it was etched screens, right? It was very, very analog. Digital was brand new. Software was practically non existent. Fast forward to today, there are people starting up business, no code, AI driven software development. The world has definitely changed, but I
Right.
think some things haven't. There still aren't complete solutions. Customers still want something that is more a dream than a reality. And there are still crazy folks like us who believe we can turn that dream really into reality and change the world's supply chains.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great point. I think that I don't even really know where this term print on demand came from. I just know that uh that's what people started calling it, shortly after. I mean, my experience goes back like 2012, beginning of 2013, with Teespring and obviously, Woot, and especially when Merch by Amazon came on the scene. I think we both experienced that initial just explosive growth of um, taking entities or sellers or individuals that probably would have never gotten into selling decorated apparel or branded merch, and then giving them this tool to being able to do that and removing all the traditional barriers to doing it. But that explosive growth of uh, I know at Teespring it was about 40% month over month at one point, of trying to, you know, support all of these digital products that people are ordering, and then, producing them after they had ordered them, and then realizing in the process that this is completely counterintuitive to how the entire traditional way of making things works, and everything in it, including, how the printing works, how the factories are operated, how the supply chain works, how the blanks are ordered, how the blanks are shipped. Just how how the blanks get into the distribution facility so that they can be, shipped quickly. I mean, the whole thing, soup to nuts. And that term print on demand somehow evolved from that era, I think. But to your point, it means so much more than just taking a t-shirt and printing it from the internet, after somebody ordered it.
Yeah, so when I, again, long, long ago, I get started in printing, and part of our onboarding, they pitched to us the idea of the printer's triangle. You've got speed, you've got quality, you've got cost. You can't balance all three evenly because every customer wants a little bit more. Well, the reality is it's not just a printer's triangle, that's essentially manufacturing and that's
Right.
product delivery. What I think really changed over the last 30 plus years, first, it started with the idea that something could be done quickly at high quality. So when I started, that was really your distinction. If you need really high quality, it's going to take longer, might not cost more, but it's going to take longer because the process wasn't on demand. But you get great quality. If you can live with not bad quality, but not as good quality, I can get it for you much, much quicker. We saw this a lot in business stationery and business services. So business cards, postcards. If you needed 50 business cards today, I could literally print something for you on a digital copier. It's not going to look phenomenal, but it's fine.
Right.
Walk it over to a cutter, cut it. If you wanted really high quality cards, right? Thermographic production, it's going to take us a little bit of time. Well, when the quality starts to cross over, and now I can literally produce something for you near on demand at the same, and in some instances, maybe even better than the old analog ways that took longer, suddenly you start to see a bit of a revolution involved with this. Cost was the other factor, right? So, for the most part, in printing and thinking about flat sheet printing, signage printing, right? Not necessarily apparel or other types, what we think of as merch today. It was, if you needed 10,000 of something, you absolutely had to give us some time to produce this analog because you're going to get a very, very good price. Digital in its early phases was much more expensive, which didn't always make sense to customers
Right.
because you just told me the quality's not quite as good, but it's going to be more expensive. It's because of the speed, because I can deliver this to you right now. When suddenly today, you fast forward between print technology and software, I could produce for you in an hour 50 garments and put them in front of you or a customer, and 9 out of 10 or more people could not tell you the difference in which machine it came off of, what method of manufacturing, that suddenly means the quality becomes the first piece. We've nailed that. I can deliver high quality product, and I could do it on demand. I could do it quick and at a reasonable price. This is where suddenly you see an evolutionary change. The other thing for me was, well, I'm not that smart, right? And so in my mind, I simplify things. Whether it's putting ink on paper or whether it is some kind of decoration on fabric, say it's a t-shirt, we're making something that fills a need or a desire of a customer. Now, the customer could be the business that's reselling these, or the customer could be my wife who's making a t-shirt that she does every year for her mom that's got a picture of all of our kids on it, right?
Yep.
Whatever the product is, I'm making a product that fills a need. How I produce it starts with giving the customer what they want, where they want, and then in a way that is sustainable, scalable. It might very well be print, but I dream of a world where, again, I'm not that smart, I'm just stealing ideas. I think about the replicator on Star Wars, right? My favorite restaurant is Chick-fil-A. I want to walk into a Chick-fil-A and I want to order my soda, and I don't actually want them to pull a cup out of a pantry where they've got thousands of them. I dream of them extruding the cup right there.
Yep.
So no waste. Don't make one more cup than you need. Just that. Straws, whatever these things are. So I like to think of where the world needs to shift, the supply chain changes, as on-demand manufacturing, on-demand fulfillment. Clearly, one of the fastest ways to get there has been in print.
Yep.
When you think further about merch and apparel, many people don't realize just how massive this is. You mentioned at the beginning, $350 billion. And there are billions of shirts, t-shirts, printed and decorated all around the world every month,
Yep.
right? Tens of billions, hundreds of billions over the course of the next year, 2, 3, 4. There's so much. The vast majority of them are made inefficiently. The vast majority of them are made with global supply chains that are not good for the environment,
Yep.
wasteful. So while I may not be the most engaged and enthusiastic environmentalist, the waste concept drives me insane. The example that I use is legitimate. There's numerous studies that have tracked this. Cotton grown in the state of Georgia, bundled, packaged up, shipped to another part of the world where
Mm-hmm.
it gets cleaned, processed, dyed. Oftentimes, then it's shipped again to somewhere else where it's actually cut into the actual fabric rolls, maybe even decorated somewhere else. And then, believe it or not, containers of those shirts get shipped back and put on a shelf at Walmart in Atlanta, Georgia,
Yep.
where it may be 15 miles from the farm where that cotton was originally grown.
Yeah.
You get a tag that says made in Sri Lanka.
Right.
Imagine if they put a tag that listed every place that that cotton had been from the
Yep.
beginning, right?
Yep.
It's that kind of waste that drives me insane. So print can help change that, but it's not the only thing to me. So I know I ran us down a rabbit hole, but I think about the industry. Print on demand is one segment. The industry I wish we would all think about is on demand provision, right? It's a supply chain that fits in lots of different verticals, lots of different segments, and especially when you think print. So I don't know if you can see, print can go on my little cup here. Print
Yep.
can go on the shirt that I'm wearing. Print can go on the notepad. Print goes on all kinds of stuff, whether it is merch that's being used, delivered, resold, or something that represents who we are, right? I just think that it has a lot of applications, so it's a wide range.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like taking uh at the most fundamental level, the moment where a consumer has committed to consuming something or purchasing something, basically either I need this, I'm going to consume it somehow, or I want it and I'm committing to taking it, everything from that moment to them getting it, should be we should be using this kind of ethos to think about, ways that we can do that with as little, as little waste and as little pre-production as possible. And look, I agree. I wouldn't consider myself to be the most you know bleeding heart, environmentalist. It's not the saving the trees and all this stuff is not the first thing that comes into my mind in the morning. But we had Iris Kornbluth on last week, who has a company called Everywhere Apparel that is doing circular apparel manufacturing. So they're taking she had all kinds of interesting statistics similar to what you were saying about, there's like 92 million tons of textile waste every single year. Some crazy percent, what you're actually bringing to Goodwill, and that whole process is not what you think in terms of truly recycling. And I mean, just pretty crazy statistics. Go check out that episode if you haven't seen it. But um, that we don't think about that, and how much overproduction is happening. There was some crazy percentage of that textile waste is due to overproduction, and it's either getting burned, or it's getting basically sent off to other places in the world where it kind of goes into a, kind of like swept under the rug kind of situation. Um, so yeah, the overproduct, and obviously print on demand is, or making on demand, doing as much of the, taking cotton and turning it into this shirt that I purchased, as many of those steps as you can, on demand after somebody's committed to buying it as possible, is huge. And that's why she has a huge interest in print on demand, because the combination of, taking truly recycled garments, where that started as something that somebody was going to throw away or donate, but really it ends up getting thrown away. And then you combine that with a water-based on-demand print, is about currently, before we can get to, extruding water bottles when I want to drink something, kind of the most like sustainable and efficient way that you could do things.
So again, it was 92, February 4th, 1992, as a matter of fact, my first day starting at Kinko's. I can still remember going through the onboarding, and our premise, it was obviously we want to make every customer happy, but pounded into our heads from the first moment of employment: done right, on time, every time. And this was the mantra. Again, I stayed there 21 years, and even we went from being owned and managed by the founder, Paul Orfila, to being owned by a private equity company, CD&R, and then being owned by FedEx, right? Three very different companies. But what made it through all of those was this idea of high quality, great customer experience. Why this really resonated with me, and I think about most people are heavily influenced by their parents, by the experiences of who they hung out with as they're going to their formative teenage years, then your early jobs. So much of my worldview, or at least when it comes to the industry, is because of the things that I did and experienced early on. So I start though with this idea that quality was driven first. But we had a lot of questions, right? It was this idea of, well, if the customer got what they wanted, when they wanted it, what's the big deal if it took me a few tries to get it there? Because again, our slogan, our internal mantra: done right, on time, every time. Not the third time, right? Not the fifth, every time. One of the reasons was Paul Orfila had founded the company, and he drove engagement with the employees through profit sharing. So every store took 6% of their store profits and divided that up every month amongst the employees.
Hmm.
So if you had a successful store where everybody was delivering done right on time every time, little to no waste, and that wasn't just in your printing. That was, you weren't wasting time on the clock. You weren't wasting materials. We were all very conservative in delivering this great experience every time out. What it meant was many of us were making as much or more money in our profit sharing checks than
Hmm.
we were in our hourly wages. Because remember,
Wow.
this was decades ago where the hourly wage was very, very small.
Yeah.
This stuck with me. So as we started to grow, as we really moved away from just pure retail delivery to real commercial, high volume, the idea of done right on time every time became far more important. I'm not just taking one or two tries to print a 50-cent resume. Now I'm printing millions of documents for Fortune 500 companies. I'm shipping literally multiple truckloads of printed documents. If you didn't catch a mistake from the beginning, if you didn't build quality into the process,
Right.
those defects could absolutely ruin not just the customer experience, but the whole relationship, the situation. So, this idea of building quality from the beginning, this is what really sparked for me. It wasn't the printing per se. I imagine had I started working overnights at a sewing shop or anything that was delivering, I'd have had a
Right.
similar experience. So it just happened to be in a place where we were printing. But it was this idea of do it right, not just once, but every single time, which really then brings into this idea everything has a place, everything's in its place. There's one right way to do everything. That one right way might change as customer requirements change, as technology changes. But
Hmm.
imagine if we always went on this journey to make sure that however I was performing something right now was still the right way
Right.
every single time. This is where I got very, very passionate. Maybe you can still tell, right, that I am. This idea, I've told this to people. My wife tells me I'm a miser. It drives her a little bit crazy. And I'm just thinking to myself, but imagine what we could do if we didn't waste all of this money. She's like, well, we couldn't do anything because you don't want to spend it. You just want to save it. Well, that's a
Right.
little bit true, right?
Yeah.
But in the manufacturing, I think I love eliminating waste more than I do actually manufacturing something. Because once you've built the process where quality is inherent and you've eliminated waste from it, then it's easy at that point to sustain. Just repeat every single time, doing it the one right way. Move on to new discovery. So, sparking my interest early on was this idea of how do we eliminate waste? How do I only do it the right way every single time?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's incredible because you know, fast forward to okay, so going back to when we met and I've been speaking in a similar way. I've been standing on my soapbox, I guess you could say. You even on a whole different level than me. And we were like kind of like crazy people at that time, and maybe we still are a little bit crazy, but we were crazy people at that time. But the world is catching up, and I really think that there's been some key moments here, and we'll talk about some of those technologies that have kind of like opened up this new world. But COVID, for example, right? COVID decimated supply chains. All of a sudden, all the part about how it's made and how it got to you versus just having the thing that you want and it being what you expected and making you happy, um, became extremely important. Whereas, for decades, nobody really cared. I mean, individuals aren't typically thinking about that. Businesses aren't really thinking about that. It's not something that they're typically optimizing for. So I think that was that was obviously a pivotal moment in this kind of being more mainstream and more valuable in terms of, you know, the broader corporate markets. And then obviously, you know, I think another byproduct of that, e-commerce, is a huge element of that. You know, just having now having a device in your hand or devices around you all the time where you can just, you know, go like this and, you know, or, you know, put your thumb on it and you've committed to purchase something. Um, and so there's a lot of like forces that have gone into this, but it's exciting to see. And I again, it goes back to like print on demand is way too limiting of a term to really embody this. But it fundamentally it's a movement or an ethos or a way of doing things and operating that will continue to disrupt retail as we know it. Again, you know, branded merch is one part. Like even print on demand's too limiting of a term, but even branded merch, we talk about the branded merch space. That's just one, you know, market in all of retail where you can really apply this way of thinking and this methodology. And I think those uh, people, entities, organizations that adopt that, you know, mentality, and certainly ones who evangelize around it will have a great future.
So I agree, and you know, it's interesting. You thinking about, again, my career's been a little long. Um, Think about moments where you had these light bulb timings, right? And light bulb moment, and just items that stick with you. So this probably would have been 20 plus years ago. I was a district manager. I was responsible for all of Central Texas. We were competing every month to be highest revenue district in the whole company. We were usually first or second. We're sitting at this meeting, and the reality was I was there to listen and learn. Just because I happened to be responsible for the district, it wasn't successful because of me. I had phenomenal managers, but always trying to think about what next. I'm sitting here and listening, and they started off the discussion. The the person leading it was one of our VPs at the time, but he just asked everybody, "Hey, give us an idea. Who are some of your competitors? Who are the companies that you're paying attention to, that you're worried about?" And everybody starts naming other small print shops, right? Or even some larger ones. And a gentleman by the name of Bill Brower, he was district manager up in Kansas City. Bill raises his hand and he says, "Quick Trip."
Hmm.
And everybody kind of gets quiet, looks around a little bit. And somebody says, "Aren't they a convenience store, a gas station?" And he says, "They absolutely are." And they said, "Are they getting into copies?" And he said, "Not that I know of, and I hope not, because that would terrify me." They're like, "Okay, well, I don't understand it." Bill said, "They are the most customer centric company that I've ever experienced. I literally will go out of my way to stop and get my gas there, to get my cup of coffee there, because every time I walk out of there, I feel a little bit better about myself,
Yep.
right? They greet you, they're friendly, it's clean, the shelves are well stocked, the coffee is fresh." He said, "It's not about who can make copies like we can, who can be cheaper, who's on a different corner than we are." He said, "Who is giving our customers the kind of experience that then they look at us and say, 'Why don't you treat me like that at Kinko's?'" Right? This stuck with me. Fast forward years later, we're owned by FedEx, and FedEx had the Purple Promise. "I will make every FedEx experience outstanding." It didn't matter if it was shipping, it didn't matter if it was sending a fax, making a copy, anything under that umbrella of FedEx offering. It wasn't just successful, it was outstanding, right? It put it on a high level. So I had these moments where, one, it was really impressed upon me, we shouldn't just think about satisfactory. It's not just a matter of doing it done right on time every time. It's a matter of, did I exceed the customer's expectation? Did I make the experience one where they really want to go rave about it? Are we making raving fans of our customers? And it doesn't matter what industry it is, shipping, printing, restaurant, gas station. Anytime you have a customer engagement, anytime somebody is in need, that need might be a want. If you can fill it happily, if you can fill it in a way where they weren't just happy giving you their money, but they're happy to tell other people to go give you their money and they're willing
Right.
to come back, you just made a bond and you disrupted, I guarantee you, some kind of a supply chain. The customer wasn't thinking about having that great experience. They were thinking about getting their need filled. So this is where I stop and think, where are these moments that have happened? And you're right about COVID. COVID changed an awful lot for us, some for better, some could argue for worse in some regards. But I'm really blessed to work for a couple of companies that have been major disruptors, right? FedEx arguably changed the world when it comes to getting something shipped quickly.
Yep.
When, people have all kinds of, there's great commercials out there. When you need it there fast, use the other guy. When you need it there quickly, well taken care of, yada, yada, yada.
Right, right, right.
Amazon bringing Prime in place, suddenly spoiling our customers and saying,
Hmm.
gosh, I really don't have to go out and get it. It can just show up on my doorstep quickly, let alone Prime same day now, right? So you have these disruptive things where things have changed. I don't care about the segments. I don't care about the verticals. I don't care about the industries. I think about, are we helping customers or business people, right? Entrepreneurs. Are we helping them find new and innovative ways to create trade and commerce and focusing on quality and experience, not just on cost? So I'm thinking about back to when we met. So I had been in printing 20 plus years by that point, and moving over into Amazon through Woot, the subsidiary, started being responsible for apparel printing. It's not really any different. I've got a substrate. I'm putting some kind of decoration on top of it, right? I'm adhering images to it. But the experience was a little bit different. Suddenly, people are buying for a very particular reason.
Hmm.
I saw a design that spoke to me. It's Father's Day. I'm going to get my dad a shirt that says something funny about fathers. A new movie is coming out, and I want to get a particular shirt about that movie series to wear to the movie premiere. You started noticing more, in my experience, this emotional bond and connection, which meant price was oftentimes a little less important, and it was more about, did you produce what I want, when I wanted, in a quality that I wanted, where I'm proud to wear that around, where I know I can wash it and hang it in my shirt and re-wear it every Father's Day or every other month when I go to this movie or whatever the case may be. I
Yep.
started noticing a difference. I think COVID enhanced emotions tremendously. Suddenly, even if you were buying something that wasn't super, super important, it had emotion connected to it.
Yep.
Maybe I'm scared to leave my house. Maybe I'm suppressed and I can't leave the house. You filled a need and made me feel important and special and valued. It might be a $2 item. It might be a $40 shirt. But again, emotion starts getting tied to these items. And this is where, for me, brings it all the way back to no waste. Because if you're waiting on this item, if there's
Yep.
emotion tied to it, how dissatisfying, how just sad and depressing if I missed the deadline, or it was the wrong item, or it just wasn't produced very, very well. Conversely, can we make it like Christmas morning every time somebody opens their package? I was waiting for this. It's
Hmm.
exactly what I wanted. I can't wait to wear it, use it, display it, whatever the case may be. This
Yep.
is where I just think certain terms that we use, including my own, right, where I talk about on-demand manufacturing, on-demand fulfillment, they don't embody the emotion and the importance of what we're doing. We are influencing, impacting, and then sometimes changing people's lives. This is where I want us to think broadly across the globe. Supply chain, not just a method or a mechanism. I might have
Yep.
rambled there a little bit, but that's where my mind always goes to.
Yeah, well, okay, so that yeah, now you open a whole another can of worms with me on the emotion. So the emotional connection that consumers have to products is another part of this revolution that at the end of the day, uh, I believe is transforming and will transform everything that we currently think about retail and the idea of the retail experience for for humans, for consumers in general. Um, so going back to my early days and the Teespring days, similar to it was very similar trajectory on the Merch by Amazon, same type of sellers and the same type similar products and experiences being created. But when we started and this is a little bit before merch. This was like really before you had like online print shops. You had places where you could go and upload something and buy them. But this idea of enabling somebody that has an idea to then represent that on a t-shirt and then let them sell it and just test it out. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, you're not out any money. Um, it started with, you know, Facebook groups. So that was like the first big wave that we experienced was like, and this is 2011 to 2013, that like what we consider influencers now. Um, it was like people that had a big Facebook group. I love my dog. I love my cat. I love Chick-fil-A. Just communities of people that like a group, and there was no ads, there was no paid reach. It was just if you had a group, you could, you had that audience. And so those groups discovered Teespring, and then they were creating T-shirts in a matter of minutes. This was even before we had one-offs. I mean, we had I forget what it was. I think it was like 48 piece
Yep.
minimum. So you had to sell at least that many, and then we handled the rest. But some of these groups had, hundreds of thousands of audiences. And, the first big one that we did, it was after the horrible Boston Marathon, terrorist attack that happened. And so there was a Boston Strong. There was an I Love Boston, and it was the unofficial Boston, Facebook group. And they're posting all these Boston things every day and is a great, very engaged community. They did this Boston Strong shirt. I forget what they sold. It was something insane. It was like they launched it and it was like boom. And so immediately, if you break that down, you think about consumers. Well, at a basic level, a t-shirt is, a means to an end, just like a piece of paper is. I want to, cover my body. Mainly people don't want to see my body, so I'm going to cover it. And it serves that purpose, right? And so a piece of paper is like a means, I want to communicate something. I need, so I need this medium to communicate something. But the content of that is kind of like where you start driving up this emotional connection. So a basic T-shirt that's providing that basic need is one level. Then, if I put the polo logo on there or Hurley or Billabong or something, that has another emotional connection as a consumer that I might have to that brand, or like what that brand might represent to me generally. But as soon as I put something like Boston Strong on there, and that's my community and those are my people, the emotional connection is so exponentially increased at that point that the 14.99 or 15.99 that I might have given Walmart for that generic Harley Davidson shirt or Billabong shirt or whatever is now going to be spent on that Boston Strong shirt. And even if that Boston Strong shirt is 24.99, it doesn't matter at that point. It's in a whole different value category for me as a consumer. And you can take that same concept and, the next one was, internet marketers and Facebook ads, right? So now instead of the, 500,000 people that are in the Boston Facebook group, you could take like, nurses who like ice fishing or some weird niche and target that exact group. And maybe there's 600 of them on Facebook, but you come up with the right design and the right concept, you've just increased that emotional connection. And there's all kinds of statistics about this and consumer behavior, particularly in our kids' generation, right? So, Gen Z and Gen A, there's all kinds of percentages that you can go look up around the preference of personalized products or products that have a more deeper emotional, deeper meaning to that consumer. And I think that's a super, super important part of the story here. That yes, in our kind of, the past, 10, 15 years of our experience in print on demand, printing and decorating physical products on demand. That's one small piece of it, but you can extrapolate that all the way into the future of retail products and experiences as we know it. The types of products that people want, the types of buying environments and buying experiences that people want to purchase products in or are drawn to. It's all part of this much, much bigger kind of picture here of the future of retail.
So I I agree entirely with you. So back in the early days with me and in Kinko's, we had started using this idea of digital to physical as digital started to come out. And we had customers who, and this was again many years ago, but customers started coming in with floppy disks, and they had a poster or a flyer they had created digitally, and they would say, "Can you print this out for me?" And in the early days, it was, "Yeah, no, we can't. Can you bring us in a printed one, and then we'll make copies of it?"
Hmm.
What we understood was, as digital concepts, as software really starts to grow, and people are now creating not by drawing, not by painting, by creating something in pixels. How do I turn that into a physical? There was a need for it early on. I think some of this is just due to my age, but I think when we can turn digital into a physical piece, it reminds us how important the physical world really truly is. You talk about the emotional connection, and it's true. Growing up in South Texas, it sure seems to me that everybody either wore Wranglers or Levi's. It was almost like you were two opposing camps, right? The Wrangler kids were on one side and the Levi's kids. And if you showed up in something else, nobody knew where you were to go. You had this
Right, right.
emotional connection. Well, as you get older, it translates into our cars. Some people may be a Ford person, somebody may be a BMW. We still have these connections. And much of this is because it represents who we are when we're out in the physical world. I wore long sleeve collared shirts and ties for 20 plus years in business. That was what I did. And I got to where I was still wearing them when I went out with my wife and kids at night, right? I wasn't a casual clothes wearing person. I join Amazon. I show up to work one day, and I am the only person in this entire building who's not wearing t-shirts and casual. Uh, uh, the controller comes into work and he's wearing sweats, right? A full sweatsuit outfit, and I was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
god, the world has changed." Well, you
Yeah.
start thinking about what represents your personal brand. I'll tell you, weirdly for me, I, I wear long sleeve t-shirts. I don't know why. I think a little bit of me thinks a long sleeve t-shirt is a little less informal than a short sleeve t-shirt. So sure, it's a t-shirt, but it's got long sleeves, so I'm still semi-formal.
Right.
But then you start thinking beyond that. You talk about groups and organizations, right? There's nothing like a Star Wars convention where people are fully dressed up, or at a minimum, they're wearing their Star Wars t-shirts. Or if I do wear a t-shirt outside of work, a lot of times it's a BYU t-shirt, right? It
Hmm.
represents a bit of who my faith, or what my faith is and what it lies in, and tells people a little bit about you. This is where personalization comes into play. And the reason I care about this is it feeds into the ability to produce product with zero waste. How
That's right.
many BYU t-shirts, how many whatever it is that you're representing, right? Boston Strong, right at that moment, how many are really needed?
Yep.
Imagine if I only produce exactly how many were needed because you had a request pool that said 12, 132, 8,097, whatever, right? That's a beautiful experience. And then if the person who wanted it also knows it was made specially for them, it's irrelevant that there were 10,000 total made. I think it matters. This one was made for you because had you not ordered it, it wouldn't be on a shelf somewhere. It wouldn't be hanging in a rack. And that builds a little more emotional connection. You add the idea that content can be created not just by the sellers, but by the consumers themselves. This is where many businesses started. Somebody said, I really want a t shirt, a poster, a book that is mine. How do I create it? They would go to a traditional printer and they would say, well, it's $1,000 for setup and you have a minimum order of 500. And the
Right.
person says, I just wanted one. How do you solve this need? Digital comes into play and giving people powerful control of the content. Now you have people who have the ability to be both a consumer and a producer, a content creator, an influencer, a buyer, whatever these relevants are. The roles can be multi-pronged because we've changed technology. So I love the idea of things can be created digitally, ethereally, translated into physical. And I love the physical because it makes it real and it
Yep.
creates that emotional connection if it doesn't need to be. There are a lot of people who are perfectly happy reading a book digitally. I don't need a printed one any longer. But when it can be, and it should be, imagine doing that done right, on time, one time, right?
Yeah.
That's where I really get pretty passionate about.
Well, yeah, and the you're right that all of this feeds all of the structural components that go into every aspect of the supply chain and how these products are made. The the episode last week with Iris, we focused on my buddy Eric Henry taught me this term dirt to shirt, and there's all this like dirt to shirt, stuff that's really interesting to dig into. But in our kind of like shirt to customer world, um, I mean, when going back to the Woot days, to the Teespring days, the early Merch by Amazon days, we and I say this all the time. We spent millions of dollars just trying to build the basic infrastructure to do, one-offs at scale. I mean, everything from how we order the product, how we receive the product, how we inventory it, how we track it through a workflow process, in the factory. I mean, the amount of money and resource that you had to be able to contribute or invest just to be able to participate was incredible. And obviously, you know, uh, we were fortunate enough at Teespring to be part of that early wave and doing big revenue. Obviously, Amazon, that's an even more extreme example of that. But I feel like really up until about, gosh, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a little bit further back, no, most entities who are part of this supply chain, whether you're a decorator of some sort, or a print shop, a paper print shop, a apparel decorator, a promotional products distributor, a team dealer, all these traditional types of entities um, really couldn't even participate. And then the types of customers that needed this type of supply chain, like your platforms, that your print on demand platforms, um, needed this API integrated or need this API integrated way of feeding orders through. So it was this like amazing uh, way of doing things that was not really compatible with any part of how the traditional industry works. And the thing that gets me so excited and got me so excited, um, has gotten me so excited over the last few years, is to see how that's evolved, and how every single year, how much more accessible it is for every normal brands and normal entities being able to produce their products in this way. And then the types of entities that are supporting this, being able to participate. And I know you've had a huge involvement in this, from what you did at Amazon to what you've done at Corneat and what you're doing at Corneat. But I would love to get your thoughts on kind of how that's evolved, and where we might be going with that.
Sure. So I should have prefaced all of this at the very beginning, where this is just my opinion from my experiences, right? So I'm not ever going to be I was going to be a high school math teacher, not a college professor, right? The level of intellect prevented me from doing both, but still, I think about the supply chain, and in my view, the supply chain really encompasses everything from the consumer, the content creator, the equipment that's involved, the software that you might need, the logistics solutions. Depending on where you stand, right? One might raise their hand and say, well, you made a great product, but you can't get it to the customer without me, Mr. Truck Driver. So my truck and me driving is the most important piece. Somebody else could turn around and argue and say, well, you wouldn't have anything to drive around if it wasn't the content creator creating this wonderful thing. The supply chain really says that all of these parts are symbiotically essential. Without them really cohesively fitting together and being one full solution, you have bits and pieces. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because when I started many, many years ago, software wasn't really part of the equation, not
Hmm.
originally. It very prominently made itself known, arguably, if not the most important piece, at least tremendously impactful, truly imperative for success. When you start thinking about digital manufacturing, I personally have always argued that the most difficult piece of the software is the firmware that's really driving the mechanical activities of your equipment. There's AI solutions now where you can design things with zero code whatsoever. You can make other pieces of software
Right.
simply by telling AI what you want it to do. But the level of intricacy needed to tell mechanical gears and belts to move, print heads to spray just the right amount of ink at a certain
Hmm.
picoliter level, at the right angle, at the right that is so incredible to think about. So all of these pieces are critical. And I personally believe that if you drew a diagram, software, draw it all the way around the solution, put it in the center of the solution, not to say that it's more prominent, but if you really want to change and have on demand be your answer everywhere, you must have software. Now, we've seen great software produced. So whether it was aggregators that have been in the space for years,
Hmm.
right? Guten, Gelato, what have you. Corneat X originally started as custom gateway years
Yep.
ago. This idea of being able to create a virtual offering that can physically match whatever it produces, to be able to route orders. We built our own software 20 years ago back at FedEx office as we were building our own commercial on-demand manufacturing network. We had 1,000+ retail stores all the way around the world, heavily built mostly in the US and Canada. And what we were trying to do is create a differentiated experience. We wanted people who are coming in for a few copies at the counter to be treated very, very important and not brushed aside for a big Fortune 500 company that's spend a lot more money. What we said was create a virtual input experience, create the on-demand manufacturing in a segregated experience. So let's do small orders in the retail stores. Let's do high volume, high commercial orders in a manufacturing environment. We had to create software that enabled that, to actually create a true promise engine scenario that said wherever the order is taken is irrelevant, wherever the order should be produced and when it should be produced and where it should be delivered is what really matters most. And that
Hmm.
might change. You might have a snowstorm in Dayton, Ohio that makes me have to pick up the order and move it to another manufacturing plant. We had to build this. We had to go through the same thing through third-party vendors inside Fast Signs with all of the different franchises needing to possibly able to share work or just having third-party manufacturing that things could be outsourced to. And then at Amazon, at the end of the day, wherever those customers were, we wanted to deliver anything that could be made on demand anywhere the customers were at in 2 hours or less. Can't do that without software that
Hmm.
helps you put the digital information at the right place at the right time. At Kornit we're doing the same thing. We're taking these really amazing printers. Yes, I'm biased. I built $1 billion business at Amazon buying a lot of these Kornit printers. Hence the reason I moved to Kornit, because I love our product. I still argue it's the greatest on-demand manufacturing equipment that's ever been made. We added software to it. So again, imagine anything that you want printed on textile, the most glorious printing possible, where you want it, when you want it. So software feeds into these. I'm not arguing it's more important than anything else, but it's an imperative symbiotic relationship. And if you put that power in the hands of both the consumers and the creators, they're going to drive the commerce for us. They're going to say what's really most important to them. And they're all different. I know folks who ultimately, I'm going to wear this t-shirt once or twice. I just want it to look good. I don't even care if it really feels sort of nice. I don't want to look too silly when I wear it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of money for it. You have others where it's as important as any clothing purchase they may have ever made.
Yeah.
Silly story. 1993, I went on a double date with my parents to a Neil Diamond concert in San Antonio. Still to this day, best concert I've ever been to. And I still have hanging in my closet the t-shirt that I bought from that Neil Diamond concert. Neil Diamond in the Round, Alamo Dome, 1993. It doesn't fit me quite the same way when I was an awful lot younger. But it matters, right? The quality matters. This experience matters. Now imagine a world where, what if something happened to that shirt? Moths, my house gets a fire or something. How can I go and get that shirt recreated, reproduced in a way that matters? I can't go into the past. The only thing I could do is maybe find somebody who's selling one or have that shirt digitally available to be produced. But now that quality better matter because I know
Right.
how well it was printed 30 some years ago. I
Yeah.
want it that same way now. So you think about these emotional experiences, the need for software, and this is where I want the world to really think I should be able to use the same software. I should be able to use the same manufacturing equipment, the same distribution networks, the same digital cabling or Wi-Fi signals moving around. But imagine I give a solution for somebody who I'm comfortable with a $10 t-shirt or somebody who says, I really want that amazing thing that matters to me and I'm willing to pay whatever it takes to get it.
Right. Right.
Find these blended solutions that do both. Because if you just create these segments that are isolated, I don't think we change the world enough. Now, I'm not saying that I want a one size fits all. I do believe that technology allows us today to give differentiated experiences. Goes to your point of personalization. I want a little bit different experience than other people because what matters to me might be a little bit different from others.
Sure.
At the end of the day, if we're all getting the same concept of a product, a printed t shirt, a printed mug, a blanket, whatever, whether it's decorated, printed is relevant. But if the product is the same, but the way it's manufactured, the way it's delivered matters to different consumers, deliver that. I think you win customers for life. We change the consumer base, that they have more control and they start to help us change and bring more positive items. I'm going to touch on one item that really matters because you've mentioned going into thrift shops. I've got 4 kids. My youngest is 14. My oldest is 23. The one thing they all have in common, they love spending my money at thrift shops, right? And they love finding something that they're like, oh my gosh, Dad, I've got to get this because it reminds me of you. Yeah, because that's the kind of clothes that I've been wearing for 30 some years because my fashion style doesn't really change.
Yeah.
But you think about the majority of product doesn't end up in thrift shops. The majority of product ends up in landfills. And you've had people who've tried to make a difference. You have people literally in South America, Africa, where they've tried to create a business by receiving all these goods. And the reality is the consumer base isn't aware of it enough. They don't care about it enough to let it get fully recycled back to them and
Yep.
recirculated. So instead, we literally have mountains of textile waste visible from space.
Yep.
It's horrendous.
Yep.
Yes, I care about the environment, but just the sheer thought of all of the manpower, all of the movement waste, all of the material waste that went into creating product that either wasn't sold or didn't matter enough to the consumer. So I think you start to build these items together, produce it on phenomenal manufacturing equipment, have software help you identify the right place to do it, the right quantity produce it, give the consumers power to demand the content they want, the product and quality and quantities that they want when they want it. Suddenly, you're driving very modern commerce, but you're doing it in, call it sustainable, call it responsible, call it efficient, call it profitable. All of those
Yep.
items really amount to the same thing that we're dealing with or should be driving towards.
Yeah, totally. And the thing that's so exciting now, in my opinion, is pretty much everybody in the whole uh every player can participate in it now. So
Yes.
um every type of brand can now participate in it. And I remember when going back to when I saw my first cornet, it was magic to me because I was in this unique situation where my buddy had started this like company that was kind of like Kickstarter for t-shirts, and we went from zero to, you know, tens of thousands of shirts per day, and everybody's wanting to do one-offs, and that was kind of like the holy grail, and we're breaking all the traditional components of how the supply chain works. And the minute I went in, it was Jay Butterfield's facility in the middle of, it was like the middle of nowhere, Iowa. There's this like shack. It literally looked like a shack. And I remember thinking like, am I in the right place? And I went in there and they had the Avalanche. I don't remember if it was I think it was the Avalanche or the Avalanche 1000. Anyways, it was like the first machine that combined, you know, the pre-treat with the white. It's one machine. You pop in a blank, the thing comes out printed, and he had the whole, albeit, you know, it was small compared to, you know, what it's evolved into, but he had the inventory. It's all, and I came from a supply chain logistics background, so when I saw these, you know, screen printing shops and decorating facilities, I was like, what is going on here? But when I went into that facility and I saw they've got the inventory with everything's barcoded. Everything has a barcode. Every bin has a barcode. I'm like, okay, this looks much more like a typical kind of like fulfillment or distribution facility that I'm used to in the transportation industry. and then I can just see the flow of everything going through, and the shirt scan boom, cart scan boom, printer scan boom, the image comes right up, it's flowing right to a dryer, going right into a package shipping label. To me, I mean, my jaw hit the floor, and I was like, this is it, this is what we need. And so, for me, that was like, I was in a unique situation where I it was the exact solution that I needed for my use case. But then once we, kind of developed that, and obviously we got a bunch of core needs, and we built software, and we had a factory. But then you realize at the time, well, I need to do polyester. I need to hit this certain red. I need to hit this certain green. I need to hit. So there were things that you couldn't do with the technology at that time. Not only was the supply chain mostly not compatible with this way of doing things, but on the product side, there were things that you couldn't do, that when we would go talk to customers from these other areas, like in licensed merch and promotional products, corporate promo especially. Um, it didn't, you couldn't check all the boxes, right? Well, can it hit this color? Can I do this polyester? Can I do this type of product? Can you do embroidery on demand like this? Can you combine those two? All these things. And so now, today, right, you can do all that, and you don't need to go spend millions and millions of dollars on developing some custom solution, or banging your head against the wall over and over and over. um, because it's all possible now. And so that's where I think, I talk about this statistic a lot, and again, it's just limited to the branded merch space, but print on demand, globally, I think is projected to be 12 billion this year, 13 billion, projected to be 100 billion by 2035, growing 30% year over year. Well, as more and more of the pie is able to be supported in this model, I think that it's going to be exponentially growing, even more, and compounding. So whether you're a normal promo business, the same type of business that is going to FedEx office, for their business cards, and has been, Kinko's FedEx office, they've probably been a customer for decades of Kinko's and FedEx office, that might be ordering $2,000 to $10,000 worth of branded merch every year through promo distributor, or a traditional kind of, bulk company, or a decorator. When they see this way of doing things, hey, did you know you could have you don't need to do that. You can just have a store that's open all the time, that has an endless aisle of products that you can add, subtract, multiply, whatever, and then you only need to order them as people want them. um, or if you have an event or something, it doesn't matter. You can order one, or you can order 300, or whatever, but only when you need it. And you don't ever have to have a, storage closet full of 3XLs and extra smalls and all this other stuff that happens. Most businesses and customers, A, don't even know that that's possible, and B, even if they knew it was possible 15 years ago, they still wouldn't have gotten all the things that they needed. Whereas today, all those problems are solved. From the customer perspective, in terms of the types of customers that can now leverage this type of technology, and then in your world, on the decorator side, and people who are, whether you're a new type of company that's looking to get into this way of doing things, or you're a screen print shop that's been screen printing for these types of businesses for decades. Everybody can participate now, and the barrier to entry is relatively low on both sides. And to me, that's the most exciting thing about, where we're at today, in my opinion.
It's fascinating. And again, I can't pinpoint the exact percentages, but one of the things that technology enables is the ability for ongoing growth. You could be the largest printer in the world, and you might still be 1% of the entire market share, right?
Hmm.
You might provide garments, you might provide t-shirts to the largest brands in the world. You might still be 1 to 2% of the market share. There's so much, and that only continues to grow, as you mentioned, when you reduce the barrier to entry. Now, the reality is, an awful lot of people in the last 10 years have become their own brand. They may not be as well known as Polo or Izod or whoever, but to their customer base, they love the message that they provide. They love the quality. We create lower barrier to entry. You give people an opportunity to create their own welfare, their own long-term plans, fill their own needs, right? I always have argued that you find a good sense of nirvana in commerce when you can be both a consumer and a provider, when you can be both the demand generator and the fulfiller, when you can use a use a manufacturing network or even be a part of a manufacturing. When you
Hmm.
have these duality of opportunities, this is where you start to see great things. I think about the product and the technology. So I was very spoiled working those years from Kinko's into FedEx because we got to use and buy and manufacture our goods on the coolest technology we could find. We were constantly on the hunt because we were a large company providing services for large companies. So you have very specific things. You have Best Buy blue, you have Home Depot orange, very specific colors you have to
Hmm.
get. If you have to produce 100,000 healthcare manuals for Humana and have them all delivered between Friday and Monday once a year, I'm printing millions of things a day. I'm printing giant signs every day. I get over to Woot, and now the printers that we had, smaller, slower. We start talking about what could we do? What are the next steps? We start thinking about these big, bold, beautiful ideas. Anything that could be made on demand anywhere in the world, 2 hours or less. What would you need? So went on the hunt with my R&D team like I'd done for decades before, hitting every trade show we can go to, walking around, testing every piece of equipment. And I kept asking everybody the same thing. First, can you meet this quality standard? And we had a sample that we had to quality. Great. Can you get me hundreds of machines in the next year? And immediately everybody says, come on. Nobody's going to grow that fast.
Yeah.
Nobody needs hundreds of machines that fast. And I said, with that kind of attitude, you're right. Here comes Cornette.
Yep.
I said, can you meet the quality standards? Yes, we can. We showed how, we figured it out. Great. I need lots of these machines. I'm going to build the largest on demand apparel network the world's ever seen. Great. We'll be right there with you. You start thinking about these ideas. And this isn't just a Cornette story, although I think it's a phenomenal story. Glad to be a part of it. But you think about people who have said, yes, we can, and here's how. Instead of saying, is that really important? Does that really matter? Do you really think that's possible? Instead, saying, my positive attitude is everything. Yes, we can. Here's how. Now you start to make these big changes. So I sat here and I think, can technology, whether it's manufacturing equipment, whether it's software, can you enable consumers to find what they want, where they want, how they want it? Can you help people create businesses, content creators, designers, influencers? Can you help them grow their business? Can you help create a bond that is more emotionally driven than I went to a store and I bought something off the shelf? Can you build all of this? I think we absolutely can. And you could throw out 10 billion, 350 billion. Those numbers, in my opinion, they're almost irrelevant because
Yeah.
those numbers will change the more we change. We build these micro economies where everybody is producing locally what they're being asked for in the best way possible. I want more of that. It's not changing in a negative way. It's just the opposite. I think we'll see more commerce because if I can create and make money, I also have more money to buy than what I want,
Right.
right? So
Right.
this is where I see this very mutually beneficial engagement. And this is what on demand does. This is what print technology does. This is what software does. But I think it takes this growing collective of minds who say that the status quo is not good enough. You can make a really harsh argument and say it was never good enough.
Right.
It wasn't the right thing. Fast fashion wasn't really what we should have been doing. Even if you don't go that far, if you just say times change, people change, needs change, absolutely. Let's find this solution that says if the only place I can get the product I need is elsewhere, then I absolutely will do a deal with this place, this elsewhere need. But if everything that people need is local, let's build that. That's an on demand experience. And then if you made something here in Texas that isn't being made the same way in New York or in London, perfect. Now either figure out a way to do that or there's a reason for trade and movement to go in place.
Yeah.
But I just keep thinking about that. Content creators, consumers, software developers, the manufacturers, the logistics. You think about all these pieces. When they're in sync, my goodness, we are
Hmm.
changing the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that idea of on demand creates more demand and taking
100%.
what would have been a million units of just plain Jane, normal, big box retail type product, but then you convert that into a million units of emotional connection, products that people have a deeper emotional connection to, uh, that are for all kinds of little niche things of all different types of people, of all different types of regions, for all different types of experiences that then flow through a decentralized distributed supply chain that's producing that one little niche thing. The niche Texas thing goes to the niche Texas printer.
So think about the technology. So this is where my experience over decades has really played in. Again, you think about the equipment, you think about the software. The demand exists. How we fulfill the demand has always been up for debate. What's the right place? What are my priorities? But let's take the Kornit equipment as an example. If you take our Apollo, I could produce up to 400 garments an hour. It doesn't matter if those are 400 of the same thing or
Right.
400 different things. Now, let's be clear. I need a little bit different software to efficiently feed 400 different things than I do 400 of the same thing. I need to pick the blanks a little bit differently. I have to order them a little bit differently. I have to deliver them next to the operator because I can operate this machine with only one person, right? I've got to feed it properly. This is where software comes into play. And it's not just software, it's planning software. It's looking at all of the orders that a manufacturing plant may have and deciding the right place at the right time with the right batch, with the right equipment, with the right operator. You need to have software. Take our smaller machines, the Atlas Max Plus, where I can produce well over 100 units an hour. Same thing. Whether it's one and I'm doing 120 of the same image, or I want 120 different, I've got to structure it and feed it effectively. You can have great equipment, but if I don't feed it properly, it sits there wasted.
Right.
Why buy a machine that can do 120 an hour if I'm not feeding it more than 20 or 30? Conversely, why buy a machine that can only do 20 or 30 when I've got this major demand that's pleading for high volume manufacturing at a great quality? This always goes into the efficiency. I don't want my teams to produce one item more or one item less than is needed, right?
Right.
At that moment. So you fit these items together. This is where we need to bring together. I don't need a 40-foot truck if I'm only delivering a few packages. I can't drive it in the back of my 2010 Honda Pilot if what I need to deliver is 10,000 garments on 26 different pallets to a concert. You put the
Mhm.
right resources in the right place, you weave all of those together. This is where we have to work as an industry. We have to join together. And I don't care if somebody is selling merchandise for trade shows, or they're selling high fashion going into a five-star store, or they're selling online. We all need printers. We all need manufacturing equipment. We need beautifully created garments. We need trucks. All of these pieces have to flow together. This is where I'd like to see more and more collaboration with the industry. Once upon a time, many, many years ago, there was a company meeting, and somebody had thrown out this idea of, let's think of all the other businesses we want to put out of business, right? We want to dominate the market by putting these other companies out of business. Then and now, I think there's room for everybody.
Mhm.
You are doing business in a morally and ethically upright way. We're not lying, cheating, stealing, breaking the law. We're trying to drive need and demand and fulfill for people, ourselves, and others. There is plenty of opportunity to work together. Let each person do what they do best and fit this. Kornit doesn't need to get into transportation. We
Right.
make phenomenal on-demand textile manufacturing, whether it is garment, whether it is fabric. We've got software that drives it. But guess what? There's always others we need to work with and partner with, and more companies working together like yours. People, whether it's the companies working together or just people like you who are trying to bring these ideas out together and drive collaboration. This is what truly excites me. And there are, what are there, 8 billion people in the world? That means there's probably 8 billion people smarter than me. Imagine if they all at least thought this idea was worth checking out, thinking about. Imagine what we could accomplish if we had more and more folks really driving off of this.
Amen. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Well, I think, gosh, I mean, I could probably sit here and talk shop with you literally for, I don't know, for 6 more hours or
We've
something.
been doing it for a lot of years, my friend.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And who knows? Maybe there would be an audience for that.
Maybe.
But I know you're a busy guy, and you've got stuff to do. But this has just been a phenomenal conversation. All kind of topics that usually come up, when we reconnect. But it is great to have you on. Really, really great to get your perspective. I hope everybody, got to learn something from this episode, or if we need to learn something, feel free to let us know. We
Well,
don't have all the, I don't have all the answers, but
oh, I'm
you know,
lucky. I'm lucky if I ever get any answer. But here's, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I'm not passionate about print. I'm not passionate about business. I'm not passionate about these segments. What I'm passionate about is giving people, helping people find opportunities to make positive, beneficial changes. I do believe that business, capitalism, I think they are virtuous items. I think they help people create what it is that they want out of life. And when you add an approach that eliminates waste and you drive efficiency, that's the difference I've always said between growing and scaling. Lots of people can grow, lower your prices, steal business from the competition. But if you didn't build a foundation that can repeat that and hold on to that, you topple. Scale is building solutions the right way from the beginning. So you just keep adding and adding. And this is where
yep,
efficiency and on demand comes into play. I think that one of the reasons I love being a part of Kornit is we've really said fashion and apparel and textile, it needs to change because there's so much opportunity to change. You have textile and apparels that are in branded merch, in POD, in fashion, in retail. You find it hanging out in all these different areas. This is where I think we've got so much opportunity. Whether you are somebody like me who's very unfashionable, or you have somebody who is very much into fashion, or somebody who just wants to start a business. This is a common playing ground for all of us to really find ways, trade ideas, trade business opportunities, add value in. This is where I'd like to see us moving for the next 5, 10, 20 years that we're around. You'll be around a bit longer than me. I'm a bit older than you, but this is where I want to see us continuing to drive. Technology is making it possible. We need enough people who believe in it. And then the last thing I'll leave with, the more people that we can get to care about eliminating waste, whether you want to say that it's about helping the environment, whether you want to say it's about adding jobs in the local workplaces, this idea of eliminating waste, if you had, and I'm talking influencers, I'm talking people whose names are known around the world.
Hmm.
If it takes a few of those people to say, wait a minute, the product that my name brand is associated with is putting 30% of everything they manufacture in a landfill
Yep.
in South America. What, are you crazy?
Yep.
We need a few people to really understand how much we need to change to create this spark and this catalyst to push the change we've been driving at an accelerated pace. This is what
Yep.
I'm hoping to see happen in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you know, what we're seeing is, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, and I think we've kind of opened this can of worms that there's no putting it back now. So it's
None.
only going to continue to compound, I think, in that direction over time. And I'm a fundamental optimist, so I believe that the best ideas will always win.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's a very, very promising future, and not long future, just the next, right now and in the short medium term. It's just such an exciting time. And if you're watching this and you're a decorator, distributor, whatever type of branded merch entity you're not, or if you're thinking about getting into branded merch, there's just never been a better time to adopt this way of thinking. So anyways, thank you so much, Aaron, for
My
coming
pleasure.
on. Obviously, I think most people who are watching have heard of Corneat. If you haven't, go ahead and Google them, check them out. If you need on-demand, manufacturing, they're absolutely world class. So, thank you so much, Aaron. We'll see everyone next week, and yeah,
My
thanks
pleasure.
again. All
Thanks,
right,
Alex. Take
take
care.
care.
Bye
Bye.
bye.